We've got live match commentary of Ireland against Finland on Sunday afternoon at 5 o'clock. Nathan Murphy will be watching it and he is with us now. Nathan, how are you getting on?
Morning, lads.
We've had a big reaction this morning to the Ireland game last night. We'll put a few of these rapid-fire comments to you. Zero Nonsense has been in touch saying, Bulgaria are 9 games into their season. They're all after playing loads of games. The Irish haven't played football in months. We look fatigued, but 60% possession shows we have potential. Mick Killeen says, there was me thinking we were the new Brazil and not playing that awful English-style football. My God, the arrogance. Dave Butler says, the players are virtually still in pre-season, so there is bound to be a bit of rustiness. Midfielders will hopefully improve into the season. Brady added energy. Different take on Robbie Brady then from Peter M here, who says, it's been 4 years of Brady and Hendrick, lads. It will be 2030 and the two will still be getting a free ride. And Aaron Lennon finally says, Malumbi for Hendrick Sunday, give him a chance. What do you think should happen, Nathan?
I think it's interesting because the dynamic is unlike one we've had before, that even though we know these nation games have some importance and in terms of playoffs and seedings, but essentially these two are warm-ups for Slovakia. So Stephen Kenny needs to have his team ready for Slovakia. So if he feels that 11 that he started last night are the 11 that he wants to play against Slovakia, he kind of needs to trust them again and go with them again and get them that game time. The front three, I thought, that was a big risk. 3 very inexperienced players. He put them all in and they all delivered. I think all 3 have got to start again on Sunday. The question is the midfield, but that's where he has the experience of Hendrick, McCarthy, Howerhan. They probably have 120 caps between them at this stage. And there was just a total lack of cohesion. So is that what people touched on, which I think is true? There is a major rustiness. Jeff Hendrick hasn't played a competitive game in 6 months. James McCarthy's had all sorts of injury problems. Conor Howeran's in pre-season. So does another 90 minutes or 60, 70 minutes together get them a greater understanding of what they need to do? Because they were just so open at times. They didn't move together as a collective, even for the goal. So Conor Howeran gives the ball away. You would think actually all he needs to do is just retreat back into his position, sort of on the left of the 3. But he goes off chasing the ball. Next thing, James McCarthy goes chasing the ball and they're wide open. Whereas you wonder if they have a bit more time together, will that mean that actually they can perform the way Stephen Kenny wants them to? Or did Stephen Kenny look at that and think, you know what, that midfield 3 isn't what I thought it was. Maybe I need a bit more energy. Maybe I need a little bit more character. Maybe I throw Jason Malumbi in there. The other young lads I threw in all delivered. So why not give Malumbi that chance? And I think that's the difficult decision for Stephen Kenny, even before you get into the fact that, yes, it is a sort of pre-season. And can these players play 2 big games in the space of 3 days?
Well, what do you think should happen then? If you were to make the changes, would you make any on Sunday?
I don't think so. I think I would go with the same 11 again. And then I think then it does mean that if it doesn't work, and maybe you give them the 45, and if it doesn't work for James McCarthy, and he doesn't start doing the things that Stephen Kenny needs him to do and be a bit more demanding on the ball, like James McCarthy needs to be a magnet in the middle of the pitch. Everything should be bouncing off him. But as John Giles was touching on last night, he wasn't a magnet for the ball. He was just pointing that it should go here, there and everywhere. And while Shane Duffy's getting stick and questions about whether Shane Duffy can fit into this system, like Shane Duffy shouldn't have been stepping forward 30, 40 yards. He should have been just playing a simple ball to James McCarthy. McCarthy didn't seem to want it a lot of the time. But I think you give him one more go. This is what Stephen Kenny believes in. You give him one more go. And if you need to change maybe at half-time or an hour in and try something different, it does mean you're going to be going to Slovakia, maybe trying something out again. But I think, if they're fit and they're ready, you probably do go more or less with the same 11 again. The alternative is actually you change the system. Like if he does want James McCarthy to be this pivotal player, but McCarthy can't play by himself at the base because he doesn't either have the personality or the legs anymore to get around. Like, do you change to a 4-2-3-1 and actually have somebody there alongside McCarthy, a Malumbi, who will actually get around with the energy you need, and then McCarthy can be what he wants to be, which seems to be a nice little ball player who just keeps things ticking over. But the front 3 did well. So why do you want to change the front 3?
Does he not have to, the system is an interesting one and he may well end up changing that. It's his very first game and drawing any massive conclusions out of it is probably a mistake. But does he not have to get McCarthy out of there? What if you flip it the other way and go, what does McCarthy have to do to get out of the team? That was it last night.
He's played 1 international game in 4 years. It's pre-season. I think to throw him out after one game, presumably, Adrian, having had 4 months of a build-up and analysis and deciding that James McCarthy was going to be a pivotal figure in the team, to decide after 60 minutes of what's essentially pre-season in some ways that, actually, no, we're done with that. James McCarthy, we're done with James McCarthy.
Well, I don't know that that's to assume that the 11 that he picked last night are the team that he's, like you say, poured over for that number of months and been so definitive to say, like he spoke about the Doherty Coleman call, that it's a fine line. Like, it might not be that he thinks that McCarthy is the second coming of Roy Keane. Maybe nobody thinks that at this point, but yeah, like I just think that, like, I suppose to ask it another way, like, how much does James McCarthy need to improve at the weekend? Like, do we think that improvement is there? Like that, like you say, obviously that he's got some time under his belt now. He's been out injured for a long time. Like, what could we possibly be expecting of him in terms of the improvement at the weekend?
I think more demanding. And the one thing is, his personality isn't going to change, and he's not this Roy Keane type figure who demanded the ball all the time. He seems happy to sort of go quietly about his business. But I was thinking back watching them last night of the 21s and maybe where Jason Malumbi fit in, and Conor Coventry was that sort of James McCarthy figure. And okay, 21s is a far, far lower level, and maybe it's a bit easier to control things. But Coventry was that magnet. Everything went through him constantly, and they were constantly looking to pick him out, and he just kept it ticking over. That never happened last night. But maybe it happened because actually Malumbi was tucked right beside him. Whereas last night, again, Hendrick and Hourihan, they weren't that close together. The pitch was very, very wide at times for that midfield three. So you never actually saw the three of them really have those nice little triangles you would expect. So does all that fall on James McCarthy? He's certainly the one who looked the most isolated and the weakest out of the three. But maybe actually it was more of a collective issue that they haven't had much time in the training ground, and that Stephen Kenny actually feels this is the system I want, that he is still a step ahead of the alternatives, which are maybe Hourihan or Harry Arter or Jason Malumbi, even though I think he'd prefer Malumbi in the either Hourihan or Hendrick position. So these are the questions that he's facing, again, that if he doesn't throw James McCarthy out after this game, and as you say, he goes and he doesn't perform again on Sunday, well, then you're going to have to go with something else in Slovakia with absolutely no time to plan for it. So that's why it is such a strange dynamic, this entire run of fixtures, and why it is incredibly difficult. But there's no doubt, like McCarthy, you watch McCarthy play for Crystal Palace, he can get a job done. Like, he can get around the pitch. I do wonder actually if you could move McCarthy to where Hourihan is playing and not have him in that central role and have somebody else in there where you still get what you want in terms of his technical ability, but maybe he doesn't have quite as much responsibility.
That's actually what Matt Holland suggested earlier on in the show, that if you flip those two midfielders, you might have a better outcome for McCarthy. Are you concerned at all about the cover in front of the defence?
Yeah, well, on last night, you would be. Like, you need balance. You need balance that, like, there was definite signs that we were getting forward more often. Like, we committed huge numbers into their half of the pitch. And when we had a bit of possession, we weren't afraid for the centre halves to step right up. But then when we lost the ball, and we lost it too often, and again, I would blame the midfield for a lot of that because they weren't supporting the front three players a lot of the time. We were miles out of position. And that is, I think that's the one worry from last night, is the one thing we sort of based a lot of the hope on was that Kenny would get us playing a more attractive attacking style of football so we could create more chances and score more goals. I think we did that. We created more chances, albeit players didn't take them. But we were also basing it on the fact we had this very solid defence that, as Stephen Kenny reckons, is one of the 10 best in Europe. But were they actually a very strong, solid defence because all they had to do was defend? That it was this constant backs to the wall job. They never left the edge of their own area. So actually, they didn't have to overly think about things. Like, again, that's on the judgment of one game, and they've all shown at club level they can do otherwise. But I think that's the one thing you would look last night and go, well, geez, if we're going to start conceding more goals, what did we concede in the last campaign? Maybe 5 goals in 8 matches. We only scored 7, but we only conceded 5, so we were able to get away with things. Whereas if suddenly we're starting to concede a few goals, you've got to be worried. But you've got to expect it's going to be a lot tighter, and particularly at home on Sunday. That I would expect a far better level of performance.
Yeah, I think that the top 10 thing wasn't hyperbole. I think that, 3 of the 4 of them play for clubs that finished in the top 9 in the Premier League last season and start for them and are standout performers for them. I hate to come back to this debate all the time, but it is actually quite interesting. In the aftermath of last night is the trust in Matt Doherty. I think it's the correct decision to put the trust in him last night, to give him a go. And I see your logic completely, that you have to be sure about dropping somebody, and to be sure maybe give somebody 180 minutes. And we know that Seamus Coleman will do a job. So if you decide that Matt Doherty isn't working, then after 180 minutes you'll have a greater sense of that. What's your hunch on that though, Nathan? Is your hunch that because we're in a back four here where it is fairly obvious that Matt Doherty is not going to have the same level of attacking output as he would, say, in a Wolves jersey, or he may have in a Tottenham jersey, who knows, that he's kind of limited in the system. That I guess those full-backs, did we expect a little bit more from them? Did we expect Matt Doherty to be popping up in more offensive positions and helping out O'Dowd a bit more?
Possibly, but sometimes games just have a certain pattern. And actually, Enda Stevens did get forward an awful lot on the other side.
Yeah.
Most of our best attacks came through that Connolly-Stevens axis. Whereas whether it was that Matt Doherty wasn't on his game or just the flow of the match was that they never got that chance. Matt Doherty didn't do anything wrong last night. If Seamus Coleman played, it may have been the exact same performance. So again, to throw him out after one match, and I understand, say, what Kevin Kilbane was saying, that like Matt Doherty is not a traditional right back. That if you're playing a flat back four, you have to have Seamus Coleman. And I did wonder at times whether he might almost flip them game to game in that away from home in matches like last night. Do you just go with Seamus Coleman, where you know you're not going to get forward as often, and he can do it, but actually you just want someone who's very solid at the back and also is a brilliant organiser. That is the one thing when I look at this Irish team of where are the characters and the personalities, maybe away from Duffy and Egan, that who are the really loud voices who are getting at players. And you don't need somebody barking all the time, but that is Coleman. Like, Coleman is the leader. He's the captain. He is the spiritual leader of that group. The respect that is in that side for Seamus Coleman. And I think they missed that a little bit last night. When he sees a little bit of a lack of organisation, he can be that on-game manager. But I still don't think it'll be enough to get him back in on Sunday. Again, I think at home, you would expect Matt Doherty to get a lot more of the ball in the opposition side of the pitch. But it's always going to be difficult for Matt Doherty because he was at a Wolves side that were so well drilled. We touched on this earlier in the week when he's moved to Spurs. You watch Wolves, you know what you're going to get. These long diagonal balls from the centre halves over the opposition's left back. Matt Doherty chests it down, little ball forward to Adama Traore. They do that 10 times per game. You're not probably going to get that with Ireland. Like, he's coming from a far deeper position. So that's going to take him a little bit of time. But maybe actually the move to Tottenham from an Irish point of view is perfect because it may well be a similar-ish role that he ends up playing there. But again, like, did he do anything wrong? Not really. He just wasn't the Matt Doherty that we've seen at times from Wolves this season. Yeah,
it's a good point. Just a reminder as well that the game is live and off the ball at 5 o'clock on Sunday. Are Finland any good? Like, I mean, I think we've all seen the Daniel O'Shaughnessy thing. They've got essentially an Irishman playing for them. About that, and Teemu Pukki, what else do they have?
Well, Teemu Pukki is the star. He scored 10 goals in the qualification campaign. They've qualified for Euro 2020. It's the first time they've ever qualified for a major tournament. And actually, Wales going there last night and getting a win, something of a surprise when you look at Finland's recent record, because they also won their group. All right, they were in League C in the last Nations League. But they're very good at home and not great away from home. So in the last qualification campaign, they lost away at Italy, at Bosnia, at Greece. In the Nations League campaign, they lost at Greece, they lost in Hungary. So at home, they're extremely difficult to beat. But away from home, they have lost a lot of games over the last couple of years. And also, they had Teemu Pukki in this ridiculous run of form, like 10 goals during a qualification campaign. It's more than Ireland scored in their entirety in the qualification campaign. So if they can keep him quiet, and I think those struggles they've had away from home, I think Ireland should expect to go and win this game, and 4 points from 2 games. I think you're going to be happy with that.
Wales, by the way, were crazy lucky last night. I don't know if people saw it, but Finland missed it. Like, Jesus, I don't know how they missed it. Some lad at the back post, like a yard and a half out, someone managed just to hit the post. And they, Bale comes off at half time, and someone managed to get the job done. But I don't know if people are expecting that we go. Yeah, but I don't know if people are expecting that we're going to beat Finland 3-0 now, and suddenly all this Stephen Kenny.
No, I don't think that. Again, people are probably thinking of Finland traditionally as one of the weaker countries, but this is as good a team as Finland have ever had. All right, they don't have the individuals of a Jari Litmanen or Sami Hupia, but Teemu Pukki is doing it at an international level all the time. But I do think when you look at that record away from home, like, generally they haven't drawn games. They win all their home matches. They lose a good few of their away matches, and they beat all the lesser teams in their group is what they've done, and that's been enough to see them through.